Good morning, and boy, have I been done some roaring early on. I do a little piece now when I first roll out of bed, when I'm feeling as if I can be angry. So I've had a go at corporate Britain, and also the fact that we seem to be more interested in coffee cake for the Prime Minister than we are that the troops are massing on the border. Now, the gentleman who joins me each Tuesday morning, I love having on because he's 24 years of age, and he looks at me and says, "You old fart, Keith." I take a totally different point of view, and that's what this show is all about: is difference of opinion. So, a very good morning to you, Fergus. How
Good
are
morning,
you?
Keith. How you doing?
All right, and you?
Yeah, not too shabby. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah,
You
good.
just hold out of bed, I take it.
No, I've been up. Took my sister to work at 7, and so I've been up and up and up and just doing the little boring admin jobs before crack
Oh,
on.
right. Yeah, it's good to get him out of the way, isn't
Yeah.
it?
How are you doing today? You all right?
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated by the fact that we're sending troops to Ukraine. All the intelligence is that the Russians are amassing troops ready to move in. NATO is gearing up. Even Joe Biden has woken up and is getting the Americans all. Everybody's worried about war. What are we worried about in our papers is whether Boris had a party cake or not. So, what's your take on it? Do you think that cake is more important than war?
Definitely not. No, I think. Well, yeah. When we were talking about this last week, I think I had the same. It's a lot of the media does do sort of distraction tactics, and it's a lot of this. Yeah, they're not really focusing on the real issues. I'd say, or the most the important issues. Basically, I know that's very
Right. Well,
subjective.
apart from the Ukraine, what would you consider? Because I always value what you say, and actually, a lot of viewers do say that it's good that we're sort of the salt and pepper, as it were, because your views are quite different to mine because of age and culture. Well, not culture, but background and so on and so forth. So, apart from Ukraine, what other issues would you say are important to you right now, other than cake in Westminster?
You've obviously got. Well, I just think the next steps out of COVID really is still sort of the issue, another important thing, because yeah, obviously we're still in the not out of it. There's still very high case numbers, and we're still on Plan B or whatever. So, what is the next steps as we go into summer, basically, and what are the rules? Do we still have to wear masks and all that sort of jazz? So, I think the Ukraine one is the really important one, I think, at the moment. Yeah.
But even so, it's funny because I had a supper with a couple of friends last night. They're my age, and one of the things that just popped up on the television when I was there were the latest COVID figures, and the lady of the house said, "There, look, you see, rising," and I think that. For some reason, we have put COVID on the back burner, but in fact, it is something we need to keep our eye on, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think in Lewis as well, we're not. I think what my sister mentioned. I'm not sure whether this is still true, but I think there are still 800 cases within the Lewis area or something like that. And when we thought it was good, it was down to 70, 80 when we thought, especially when you during the second or third lockdown, and you're like, okay, how's Lewis doing compared to the rest of Sussex? So, yeah, 70 or 80 was, well, it was high, but it was considered quite good. Whereas now it's looking at 800. But obviously the relative nastiness of the strain is different, but it's still it's something still that can't be ignored or shouldn't be ignored, basically.
No.
So.
Well, looking at what I mean, it is still, in my opinion, sort of the politicians versus the scientists. But one of I think the World Health Organization leader said yesterday, be careful, don't think that it's all tucked away, but also that there are all sorts of different variants that are coming, and they really don't know whether they're going to be nasty or whether they'll be controllable. So I suppose we're still in the land, as far as the scientists are concerned, of hey, be very careful.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Do you, as a small businessman, are you making provision that just in case it all gets out of hand again and we had another lockdown? I mean, do you factor that into your forward planning?
A little. It's sort of like a linger back of the mind thought at the moment. I sort of go on the assumption that we've probably gone through the worst of it, or at least, especially the pre-Christmas period was, well, when everything was high and it was all kicking off. And so you do just be extra careful in terms of, you wear face masks, you try not to go to too many crowded places. Your social life definitely gets a little bit restricted because you're not wanting to go to the pub, or you think it's too risky to go to a pub or travel on public transport. But yeah, now that we're sort of get on a better path anyway, it's and I think that we're going through it. It's just a lingering thought really, and I think if it does kick off again, then it is time to sort of bring that to the forefront of your mind really. So there are given January being a particularly slow month for the drinks industry.
Everybody stops drinking after Christmas.
Yeah, it gives me quite. There are other things I can focus on and other parts to plan and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Now, tell me this: how people order your wine online, but for it to get to their table, how does it come in from overseas?
So it would mostly be on ships. A lot of the stuff would be coming on ships. I don't think very little is air freighted just because it costs more. But there are a lot of troubles. Well, there's a lot of political tension in South America at the moment, especially out the Chile area. North America is very, very tricky to get stuff from as well, apparently. And yeah, stuff from Australia, New Zealand is also a bit. New Zealand Classic is quite. We spoke about this before, when there's a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc shortage that you would be seen just because of a variety of factors. But it is. Yeah, it is. It's better from what I understand. The lead times are a little bit better than they were. But then it also, because it's a crop at the end of the day, it does go through seasonal factors, and so it does. Like for instance, stuff coming out of Burgundies, they had a poor season, affected by frost, so their yields are down, and so it's also, trying to factor in that and the contracts that they have in place with suppliers and other things like that in terms of what they can give, volume requirements and other things like that. So it's all it gets a little bit too complex basically as you work your way up. And
yeah. So, what sort of time scale do you give to your customers? I mean, if I order today, when can I expect a delivery?
Oh, you can from me personally, you can get it the very same day if you live within the area. It's right. Whether because my numbers are relative to the amount of stock I have. If the stock's zero, then you're just going to have to wait until that wine's back in stock.
Well, tell me this. I mean, there was a lot of hoo-ha and to-do about what the Port Authority in Dover was calling the perfect storm. Everybody tried to get onto the ferry all at the same time or go through the tunnel. And there were trailbacks of lorries and so on, stretching for miles. And presumably it was the same on the other side of the tunnel. Now, is that sort of thing affect you in terms of delivery?
In terms of a company, we don't ship outside of the UK yet because just because there's a lot of extra paper, and I'm new to the industry, and it would be a relatively new thing to do, to try and learn all these different codes. I have tried it and have thought about going into it, but it's just not something we do yet. But it could be something we might go into.
But what about inward shipments?
Yeah, there obviously, like I said, there is a little bit of an effect, but I'm not sure whether it is held at the borders. That's not what I've heard. I don't think going through clearing or anything like that is particularly tricky. I think a lot of it is when it gets checked off by EU customs and stuff like that, because they're very strict about it all, and I think we probably want to make it a little bit more difficult for food related goods to get enter into the UK. So they're probably extra tricky. At least I know a friend of mine who does that. He imports Spanish products, and his lead times are huge at the moment. They take a long time. A lot of his products are taking a long time to enter into the UK, just because of these extra checks and all that sort of stuff. And he has to show paperwork as to where their origin, and if he does like Cantabrian anchovies is what his thing is. So, but then they get shipped to Italy where they have oil put in them, so he has to show why they're going over there, what the name of that place is, get that all signed off, and there's a lot of complex stuff basically.
Bureaucracy, yeah. Now the weather today, you might just be able to see the trees behind me, which are my weather vanes. It's a very light breeze, and we're starting off at 2 degrees, but only going up to 5, and not very much chance of rain. Now that's here, and you just made reference to frost and so on being a factor. But last week we discussed a vintage year, and you thought that the weather was pretty good this year, the way that it stood last week, for us to get a decent crop. I mean, particularly in this country where we really are starting to forge ahead as wine producers. What's your view now? Because more or less all week, it's ranged from sort of -1 to 7. It's been a light breeze. We've had no rain. Is that good for wine growing, or is it not?
Yeah, it is good. Yeah. I wouldn't take 1 week though as a projection for the rest, but I can't. There's not particularly much frost, I don't think. Yeah, it should be fine. Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah, it's quite hard. All the tricky stuff is sort of coming. Well, all the sort of the veraison and all that sort of stuff happens when it starts to warm up in the springtime. So at this time they'd be sort of picking off shoots that they don't want and other things like that. So yeah, it's just a sort of vineyard management at the moment, and to try and just make sure everything when it does heat up and the juices all the sugars need to concentrate in one area. That's just sort of making sure everything that is heading towards the right tunnel, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's very easy, and I really smack my fingers for it, because we can be very inward looking and saying, what's the weather like here, and what's it going to do to English wines and so on. But you mentioned that a lot of your wine comes from Chile, and I'm a great fan of Chilean wines, but much of it comes from South America, and that the political climate down there in several countries is hotting up and could have an effect. But what about the climate? What sort of climate do they have right now, and what sort of climate do you need, so that you'll be saying to me, Keith, you've got to try this Chilean wine because it's brilliant?
Well, at the moment it'd be they're coming off summer. They would be picking around now. This would be sort of their time. So going into sort of autumn period. So I guess it would be fairly warm still, just because, well, obviously it depends where you are within the region of South America, but I can still imagine it being fairly warm. But yeah, there's a lot of interest in terms of South American countries because of climate change and stuff like that. The environment, it gets too hot, and when the region is too hot, the grapes that were meant to grow, it's a bit like Bordeaux at the moment. They're really struggling because the temperatures are higher, and the grapes that are grown there don't suit that type of climate, and so it could be an interesting scene to see how, even if just a few degrees increase, half a degree or a degree increase in the temperatures could really affect the wine growers out in South America. Yeah.
I mean, I sometimes, because I concentrate on a lot of other things, are dismissed by some of my colleagues and friends as not taking climate change seriously. But for instance, I actually subscribe to a little social media thing for Vancouver, because I lived there for so many years, and it would appear that Vancouver, which normally has such a mild climate, has been inundated with snowstorms this year. Now, if that's happening in the northern part of North America, is that a threat to the crop in the southern part of the Americas?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one, to be honest with you, Keith.
You don't keep an eye on what's happening where your wines come from, particularly.
I mean, I don't. Not from a day-to-day aspect. No.
Yeah. No, it is interesting because I like a lot of people. I can put a glass of wine to my nose and I can say it's got a nice bouquet, and I can take a sip and say, blah, 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 blah. But my knowledge really of wine and wine growing is very, very limited. And I would suspect that an awful lot of people that buy a bottle of wine don't know the difference between a £5 bottle and a £50 bottle. So I think that what you tell us is quite interesting and quite important. I can remember once tasting a Chilean wine and thinking, or saying actually, oh my gosh, this tastes absolutely wonderful. And then somebody told me that because the grape comes off the bottom of I think it's the Andes mountain, is it? That it has a particularly thick skin which keeps the juice in. So that's why Chilean wines are particularly good. Now, I learned something. And when I look at a Chilean wine, I think, oh, yes, that came from a special kind of grape. After that, I can look at any other grape and I haven't a damn clue about it. Yeah. So we look to you, people like you who are in the industry and understand it intimately to actually steer us. A lot of people would say, oh, I don't need to know. But secretly, what they're hoping is that they won't be found out that they don't understand what wine is all about.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. That was quite an interesting comment that your friend said, because there are, well, regardless of whether it sits at the bottom of the Andes, it could be a thick skin, thin skin. It doesn't really. It depends on what the climate is and how it grows. So there's Pinot Noir grows in Chile, which is a relatively thin skin grape variety, but then you've got Carmenere, which is a relatively thick skin grape variety. So it is yeah. Your friend might need to look back at his textbook or something like that. It's just very much on.
So all these years I'm going on a misconception.
Maybe. Yeah, it's quite a generalization anyway. It's a very large generalization, really. So,
yeah. Now, just turning to French wines or European wines for a moment, because some of them are called Côte de. Côte de Rhône, for instance. And my understanding is that the word côte or côte means a coast or bank, and that a lot of vineyards are on the banks of rivers or lakes or whatever, very close to water. Is there a difference between a grape that is grown on the banks of a river and those which are grown in the sort of the hinterland, as it were, on acres and acres and acres of vines?
There is a difference, yeah. There's because especially along a riverbank, you're less likely to get temperature variations as well as you work your way in, because obviously water it's liquid rather than solid, and so it's able to hold heat differently to what land would do. So especially when you look at along the riverbed, you see a lot, especially in France, or some regions in France, like the Loire, or a lot of vineyards are along the bank because they hold heat well, and also that extra dampness as well gives rise to another. You can make sweet wines out of that, or pasteurized wine, which is where a particular mold grows on it. So they're very good for not allowing too much temperature variation, basically. So yeah.
Right. Just one more little session of education, if we may, because when you actually, first of all, we talked last week about a wine being corked, and you explained how it could be corked. But if I actually take a sip of a glass of wine, what can I expect to taste, or what should I be looking for if I want to know whether it's corked or not?
You think it like cardboardy, it's like wet doggy sort of flavor. It's not particularly nice. You definitely know where it's like it will have a slight it just won't be as fruity. The nose won't be as fruity as well. You're looking like a cardboardy, wet doggy sort of smell, basically, and
Right.
also taste. It shouldn't taste as won't particularly taste very fruity. It'll taste, yeah, just sort of, it'll lose a bit of, feels quite dusty as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now you talk, or wine experts talk about the bouquet, and you sniff a little around the wine before you start to taste it. What should you expect from smelling a wine, or sniffing a wine?
Well, a lot of wines have the what known as a primary aromas. So every wine will have a primary aroma, whether it be a bouquet, like you mentioned. So a bouquet is usually like roses or something, or sort of quite floral in itself. But then others may not display that. They may display apples, or they will like citrusy as well, so lemons, limes, you've got grapefruits and all that sort of stuff. But then you've also got red wines, which have red fruits, black fruits, and other things like that. So every single wine that you will try should have a primary aroma. And then there are other stages after that where the wine gets more complex. You may have heard that word before. And that goes into secondary aromas and tertiary aromas as well. So secondary aromas occur when the post fermentation and the winemaker wants to do something to the wine, just to change it, to make it more complex, change it up a little bit if you think it needs a little bit more texture, or if it needs a certain extra element to it. That's like, you might have, especially with Burgundy, for instance, they like to go through malolactic fermentation or stirring of the lees. It makes it a little bit more creamy or a little bit more buttery. And then there's the tertiary aromas, which are sort of in the aging process. So that's why some oxidized wines. So sometimes that's why fine wines demand such a high price, because they should have a combination of all three. You have your primary aromas. If let's take a red wine for instance, it'll have red fruit flavors because it's aged. Let's say it's a 2001 vintage from Bordeaux. It'll have potentially a bit of oak in there if the winemaker chooses to do that. So you've got your secondary aromas coming through there. And then the tertiary side of thing, if it's slightly oxidized or it's gone through the aging process again, you will have a little bit more oaky, but also the fruit will sort of it'll ripen. It'll become a little bit more ripe, and yeah, and that's a sign of a tertiary aroma, basically, and all that sort of. It might have a bit of mushroomy texture as well, and all that sort of stuff. So, but that becomes very complex after a while, and you have to taste a lot of wines to know what you're looking for, basically.
Yeah.
Colour
I mean, yeah, we're
as well.
all given a little soupçon to taste before we actually commit to the bottle. Are we
Mhm.
looking for the same sort of thing when we have a little taste?
I guess what you'll, especially if someone opens a bottle at a restaurant and you are given that little bit of taste at the start, that's just to see whether the wine has got any faults in it. If you are happy with the wine, and then it's up to you whether you enjoy it. If it's your thing and you've paid £400 for it, then you crack on. But if it's unfortunately, if it's not your thing and you paid £400 for it, then you sort of shot yourself in the foot a little bit there. One of those. You should know if you're spending £400 on a bottle of wine what you're looking for and what you should like. So,
Now, one final question before we move on to other things is, because it's 24 minutes past 8, so we've been chatting for 24 minutes already. Doesn't time go quickly? When you're offered a house wine, how carefully are house wines generally chosen? Or are they the sort of thing is, we got that cheaply, let's throw it at the customer?
it's probably it's a bit of it. I worked in a number of restaurants, and it's very much restaurant dependent, I'd say, as to what they try. And house wine is meant to please everybody. It's meant to be acceptable for everybody. It's not too. It's just sort of, yeah. Especially with red wines, it's not too tan. It hasn't got too many tannins. It's not full bodied, but it's not light bodied. It sort of sits nicely in the middle. Especially with white wines, it's got a good level of flavour, but it's not too acidic. It's fairly good quality. It should be like that. And I think some restaurants will probably chuck their cheapest wine and then say that's the house wine, and I think that's what a lot of people. But if you go to a fairly respectable restaurant, they'll pick with so well they'll use quite a good supplier that will recommend a house wine that sits at a nice price level that's pretty accessible to everybody and sort of does the job as your standard wine. And because a lot of people probably do just go, we'll just have the house wine because they're not they're not particularly knowledgeable, or they don't know really what they're looking for, so they'll use that as a guide of a good level, basically a good quality level. But then if you go to some European countries, a lot of them pride themselves on the house wine being the best wine that they've got. They generally back it because that's what they're representing as a restaurant. This is the house wine, and this is what we do right here, and this is what we back at the moment. So, yeah, it's a case by case basis, I'd say.
Yeah, I keep on saying this is the last question about wine,
Yeah.
but one more because you just triggered something in my mind. Is generally speaking, people on the continent, particularly in France and Italy, they grow up with wine, so they're fairly knowledgeable when they go to a restaurant. They know what they're talking about and what they're looking for. Uh, we now are getting much better. I mean, believe it or not, before you were born, in the 1980s in Northern Ireland, if you went into a pub and it had wine, it was considered to be a sissy pub.
Yeah.
Now, of course, wine probably outsells beer in pubs. Are we becoming as sophisticated as our cousins on the continent, or do we still have a long way to go?
Wow, this is in a beer drinking town that we live in. I don't think wine obviously wine gets that sort of label of sophistication, it is just another form of it's another form of alcohol, basically. I don't think if you drink spirits, you're of a lower sophistication than if you drink beer, and if you drink beer, you're a lower sophistication than if you drink wine. I just think it's whatever your preference is, really. Like my girlfriend doesn't particularly like beer; she likes wine and likes gin and tonics. But then some people may really not like wine and really like beer. So it doesn't mean you're less sophisticated. But I do think people within the UK are growing to more wine, whether it be from an investment point of view, or just obviously traveling a lot to all these countries and trying these wines, and then go, actually, I'd like a little throwback to when we were there, where I really remember this wine and this was really nice. So I think there's been a trend, and I think lockdown probably helped with that as well. Probably people trying new stuff. There's a good little company that started up, I think that was quite successful, and unfortunately has folded over the last few months, just because I think it was very much a lockdown project. But they were sort of doing a wine tasting, um, sort of monthly subscription, where you'd get 2 bottles of wine from that was a little bit different, and you'd get wine tasting cards, and it teach you how to judge and assess wine, sort of like. And that was quite a nice little idea. There were obviously few faults with it, or areas that needed to improve, but I think the general gist of it, I think people are up for trying new stuff, and I think experiences are a new thing, or a thing that people are looking for and trying to better themselves, and so I think wine and probably a lot of other things that go hand in hand with that. Yeah, and I think it's always nice you sort of because the word sophistication is thrown in with wine. I think people being English, want to be more sophisticated, and so trying to learn a little bit more about the wine to show off and all that sort of stuff, and quite flaunty. It probably does come into it.
Yeah. I mean, quite often, particularly in smaller communities in France, for instance, is you'll go in and order lunch, and half a carafe of wine will appear, and you haven't ordered it, but it comes with the lunch
Yeah.
as standard.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever had that experience here. Have you?
No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody was that generous over here. No. What I loved about when I went to Corfu over the summer, and sometimes they'll just go, they'll have it's either white, red, or rosé, and they'll come in like a little jug, and that's what I sort of in a nice little taverna on the seafront, and you're like, I'll just have a jug of wine, please, and that's sort of quite nice. I like that, and I don't, yeah. So, but that's just me. I think.
Yeah, I like it too, I may say.
Yeah.
Right, it's 8:30. We've been going for half an hour. Let's just take a very quick break and gather our breath, and then we'll come back and together we'll take a look at the papers and all this business about Boris's cake. Hi, good morning. You are watching Mirador Television coming out of Lewes in East Sussex. Is Keith Hayes and my young expert on almost everything, particularly wine, but a lot of other things as well, Fergus Wood. All right, Fergus, let's just take a look at the newspaper headlines this morning. I got up and I was really quite annoyed because when I checked the front pages, I found that more were interested in the cake that Boris had for his birthday during lockdown than they were in the fact that there are troops massing on the border. And I made a little bet with myself, and I thought I'll tune into the BBC. Let's see what their main story is. Now, give them credit. Their second story was the Russians, but the first story, birthday cake in number 10. And I must say that I'm getting a bit fed up with the fact that they're scurrying around trying to find every last little crumb about this thing. Okay, there is an inquiry and they can come up with whatever decision that they do. But we seem to be fixated with what happened during lockdown in number 10. And the Mirror this morning is another day, another party. Well, that's absolutely right. But if they keep looking, they can find probably a party every day. And it says PM's number 10 birthday bash in lockdown. The Times, the Thunderer, Johnson held lockdown birthday party at number 10. And it just shows you, doesn't it, how the media have decided that this issue is far more important than the fact that we might be at war this evening. What's your view, Fergus?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it does seem like, there's a general witch. It seems like there is a witch hunt for Johnson. Yeah, and it is. Yeah, there are. I think we touched on it earlier in the program. I think there are definitely other issues and bigger issues and more important issues than this. Yeah. It does seem. Yeah, a lot of. Yeah, I mean the whole. Ever since. Well, I don't know. It's been frustrating. Like especially ever since Trump. Well, take Trump for instance coming in, and the whole the sort of the distraction that he generates from say other important issues such as global warming or anything like that, and how we're going to tackle that. I think it's very inefficient, or it would take up extra time trying to deal with these sort of characters and these sort of instances where they could be done on actually progressive things for the society. I find it very frustrating.
Yeah. It is interesting that the papers that you would think would pay attention to what's happening in the United States don't seem to be, because Joe Biden, for whom I've not had much regard, seems to have put his foot in it in foreign policy time after time after time. Now, this morning he is reported to have alerted American forces to say, hey, come on, you may have to dash into Ukraine. But generally speaking, he's not been very steady, not a very good hand on the tiller in foreign policy. But if it's not reported to us in the newspapers, how would we ever know? I mean, I have to go scouting through the all sorts of various websites to even find out what the hell he's saying. And I find that very difficult to justify. because after all, they are the biggest economy on the face of the earth. They are still probably just the most powerful nation. And what they do, I mean, as America goes, so goes the rest of the world in many ways. And I find that the fact that a paper like the Times is concentrating on a birthday cake and not looking at some of the things that are going to affect us quite badly, or possibly affect us in the next little while, are quite disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that there's not too widely reported, and you just touched on it, is that it would appear that the parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, are really getting worried because Trump has not given up, and that he's got this campaign going, and everybody's so peed off with the fact that they've got poor government after he's gone, that he's actually getting popular appeal again. Now, if that's not a distraction, what is?
Yeah, that would be quite disastrous, I can imagine. Yeah, it's not going to be great. Or at least if he somehow enters the frame of the next the next parliament, American parliament, then yeah, it's going to be a bit dire, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, but nonetheless, I mean, as we get closer, what is Biden almost 2 years into his term now, a year and a half? Yeah. It's 4 years goes very quickly, and most American presidents manage to get to an 8-year term. Biden is very old. I say that in as much as he's younger than I am, but it's. I put my foot in it deliberately.
Yeah.
he does it by mistake. But we don't hear much about, at the time of the election, there was much said about his deputy, the vice president, who is a lady, and most people say is very competent and, somebody that people would feel happy about steering the country. But presidents are notorious for making sure that they bury their vice president. Because they don't want the glory taken off them. Yeah. And it would appear that perhaps Biden is doing that and not giving us a chance to see what this lady is capable of.
Well, I hope not. I hope that, because she is a hopeful. She's a Democratic hopeful, isn't she? And she is, from what I do read as well, that she's very good at her job. So I hope not.
Yeah. Well, I would hope not too. But one of the things that I personally am convinced is that if you're in the political bubble, is that politics becomes far more important than anything else. You forget your constituents, you forget whatever's happening outside, you even forget important decisions on the basis of either the party or how to hold on to power or how to get away without criticism and so on and so forth. That the end result doesn't necessarily reflect what is good for the populace. And the American political system is very complex in many ways, and that politics is really at the root of things rather than the welfare of the nation. And that, in my opinion, was why Trump got in the first place. The American populace generally were pretty pissed off with both Republicans and Democrats and said we wanted to try something new. The fact that went sour is beside the point. But if the one would have thought that the political parties, as they stand at the moment, would be concerned about that, but they don't seem to be.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I don't have much to add to that. Sorry, Keith.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I love it when you agree with me because I feel as if I've said something right. Right. The Daily Mail. PM's Mr. Brexit. Kill off the tax hike. Now, one can say there is no front page coverage there of a cake. Oh, yes, there is. Because although that's the headline, there is Boris holding his birthday cake with a sidebar. New storm over Boris's 10-minute birthday party at number 10. I haven't read the details about this birthday party, but if it only lasted for 10 minutes, my God, that was 10 minutes in politics that has caused a row. Right. How about the something that you, though, as a businessman, is this idea that national insurance, I think, is going to rise, and there is some threat to suggestions that perhaps VAT might increase and so on and so forth. In other words, the government is going to have to pay for all the money they've lashed out over the last 2 years. How worried are you as a small businessman about tax increases? And I wonder if I could just say there that one of the things that people don't realize is this country is about 85% SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises. So in other words, you and me and so on and so forth, we make up 85% of industry and commerce and economic activity. The big boys who shout the odds and wield the power only make up 15% of it. So the government really has to worry about what you and I think about some of these things. It has been mooted that any tax hike would be very, very unpopular, but also crippling. The cabinet have been saying to Boris, look, for God's sake, don't make the increase that you said. Now, what sort of effect will tax rises have on you, your business personally, but also our sector, if you like, small to medium-sized enterprise?
I think it would, yeah, I think it would be obviously quite, the demand should naturally go down if the economics works right. So yeah, and you can only assume that it would get tougher, really. And there's already, especially within my industry, cardboard prices have gone up. The cost of cardboard has gone up. Cost of glass has gone up as well, and so things are only getting more expensive. Obviously, freight and transport are going up as well. So it does. The numbers do, the price of things do, the cost of things keep going up. And if you're working off margins like a lot of us do in the wine industry, then the prices do naturally go up as well. And taxes obviously is proportional. And so as the cost goes up, the level of tax goes up as well, and given the relative amount. So yeah, it will. I mean, it will hurt the consumer at the end of the day as well, because they'll have less disposable income and they'll be consuming more. But maybe, yeah, I don't know. It's not good anyway. I can't imagine it being a very popular move anyway for a lot of it. That could kill him. That could kill his. Given everything, that could probably just bring Boris to his knees. Yeah.
Now, I know that you and your family, as they say, keep a very good table on a Sunday, and the stats mooted last week were that the meat, beef and lamb, the price increase was 10 to 12%, making it much more expensive. Incidentally, I think this will bring a sparkle to your eye. The fourth thing that in the list prices have raised and shot up are used cars, of all things. But do you find that your Sunday lunch is costing more, and that it's not necessarily the wine that's boosting up the price?
Probably. I don't do the Sunday roast purchases, but and we don't do it. Well, to be fair, we don't. Yeah, I don't know. I'd say so. Food. Yeah, I'd say food definitely has gone up. So yeah, the food prices have gone up. So
you don't do the shopping.
I do it every now and again, very, very often. We sort of take it in turns, but yeah, it's not too much of a regular affair.
Well, I just pop in. I try not to have sort of lots of stuff in the fridge, because then it gets stuck in the fridge and goes bad, and it's a waste of money. So I buy things in bits and pieces, and it's quite interesting when you go into a supermarket. Is that something was £1 yesterday and it's shot up to £1.50 today, and that sort of shows the inflationary nature of our economy and what's going on. Inflation hit 5.4%, I think, last week, and the price hikes, as I say, anywhere from 8 to 12% on various things, and particularly foodstuffs. Of course, the energy prices are going to have a heck of an impact. But I mean, as a young man with a lovely lady whom I met the other day, and you're very much a sort of a traditional family man, is Sunday lunch and so on and so forth. I mean, how concerned are you about all these economic factors which point to a lot more money going out of our pockets to buy the essentials rather than to buy the luxuries?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm a little bit more concerned. Yeah, it's definitely it just squeezes the purse strings, doesn't it? And especially with like another big issue that we haven't touched at all today is the cost of energy and stuff like that. And that's sort of been brushed away from last week to this week. So yeah, I don't think. Well, I think it's just going to be. Yeah, it's just tighter on the purse strings unless wages increase as well. Unless there's a match to match increase, a relative increase in wages as inflation goes, then things will get tougher, or things do get tougher, and you aren't likely to spend more on luxury. I mean, I don't. I have a second job as well. I work at the Griffin Inn a few evenings every week over in Fletching, and so that supports my income. And because otherwise it is tough. There's not a lot to live off basically. So yeah, it's a bit tricky, but we keep going.
Yeah. I mean, we're back to two jobs Britain.
Yeah, if that, well, especially if we're shutting all the borders, and not letting anybody else come in, and there are jobs that need filling.
Yeah.
So.
I've got 6 jobs and none of them make any money. That's
Yeah.
The Sun can't get away from it. You can't have your birthday cake and eat it, Boris. I find that Rupert Murdoch's papers, they can't make up their mind whether they are supporting the Prime Minister or the government or not. One day they seem to be saying it's okay what you're doing, and the next having a real go at him. But as I said, there is some suggestion, and let's not anger Mr. Rupert Murdoch, my God. I mean, we're one of the very few television stations that he doesn't own in the country.
Yeah.
So we want to stay on his side. But as I said, there have been some suggestions that senior members of the Sun, their management, had a few parties themselves during lockdown. So they're not that keen to highlight the fact that Boris was playing fast and loose with the rest of us at Westminster. But they've certainly turned today and having a go at him. So Rupert has obviously phoned the editors and said, all bets are off, away you go. The Daily Express, which is very supportive of the government, they've moved away from the birthday issue, and they are what you and I both think is an important issue. Boris warns Putin of painful and bloody invasion. I mean, Boris has actually been standing up and saying, look, you want to step one foot into Ukraine and start off this little lot, you may actually find that you get tanked rather more than you think, because you're using military muscle. But the one thing that the West still has got is economic muscle. And I must say that we have. And having worked and lived to some extent in Russia, of course, their economy is very much based on natural resources, gas, oil, and diamonds. And after that, not a great industrial country at all. In fact, very, very agrarian. It's a huge country, very agrarian. But one of the things that while I was in the Ukraine, which was a part of the Russian Federation, in eastern Ukraine, when you drove around, you would come around a corner and you would see a factory, which was now turning out knives and forks or tin plates or whatever. But at the gates, there was still a MiG set in concrete with its nose pointed to the air. In other words, this is where all sorts of things militarily were made when we were part of the Russian Empire. You know, it's a very interesting contradiction in terms. But anyway, the Express is saying, okay, Boris is warning them, maybe be careful what you wish for, because military might isn't everything that might come out. The Daily Telegraph: Biden prepares troops to face Putin deal. Well, we mentioned that earlier. That at long last, Biden is he's waking up to the fact once again America can't ignore what's happening in Europe, and that what's happening now is a bit alarming. If only our newspapers in the main would wake up to that. The Star. The Star has been actually delightful the last few weeks because it's been all about extraterrestrials. There are a lot of aliens floating around watching us, and we've taken our eye off the ball because we were worried about a cake at Westminster. But they've actually abandoned the alien threat this morning, and they've got on the cake as well. So it just shows you how important this cake has become. Yeah. It's 8:51. At this stage, I'm always grateful and actually delighted to have you, because it's a lot of fun having you, particularly since you don't mind calling me an old fart when I go down one particular route and you say, no, hang on. And you do it so politely and nicely. You sort of smash me to pieces and sort of say, now, Keith. But we've had a good chat about wine this morning, and we will continue when we meet on a Tuesday to have chats about wine, because a lot of people simply don't understand the wine industry. They will happily go into a restaurant and they'll order wine and they have no idea why they're doing it or what they're getting. So we'll continue that. But is there anything that you would like to raise before we say goodbye that is bothering you? Whether it be local, national, international, or whatever?
No, nothing on my mind at the moment. Nothing getting on nothing rubbing me the wrong way. No, we're all good.
All right. Well, let me just ask you a question, which is right off what we've talked about. You just said that you go and you do bar duty at the Griffin in yes. Fletching, is it?
Fletching, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been to the Griffin in Fletching. I must actually ask somebody with a car to take me down there one night and have a pint. I've heard that it's a very nice pub.
Superb.
Are you finding that the pubs are returning to being pubs? Because even when lockdown was eased, the pub population was quite different to what it was when lockdown was first imposed. Are you finding the pubs are getting back to being the nice, cozy places with people bellowing up to the bar and having a chat and so on?
At least at the Griffin, they are, yeah. Yeah, but obviously that you can't really take one and generalize it to the wider. I think there are probably still a lot of businesses that are struggling, a lot of pubs that are struggling, and I think that Griffin has got a good reputation and a good history, that it probably leans off that, and there's very good and wealthy patrons as well that go there. So I think that also benefits. But January's also been a fairly quiet month for them. Sometimes some days are very busy, but then other days it's pretty dead. So I think it's just January is just a weird time for a lot of people. So
Do you want to take a reading at the moment?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, difficult. I think. Yeah, I think once things calm down a little bit into RE COVID, I think people will be more inclined to go out and support their local. Especially before COVID, it was nice sitting out in a beer garden if you got a nice bit in the summer. And then by the Griffin, it's whatever tickles your fancy. The interesting thing I think will be to see is because people obviously drank a lot. Well, they were drinking at home, and during lockdown they were buying beer from the supermarket or from local off license or online or whatever. The cost of buying, say, a bottle of wine, you could buy a bottle of wine for as much as you could buy a pint in a pub and all that sort of stuff. So I think it'd be interesting to see whether people their preferences will still be more aligned to going out and socializing and having that atmosphere, or whether they will more likely have more in-house stuff at homes or wherever they are, and drink with people that they like within a closed, safe environment. So I don't know what the repercussions of that will be, or what the displacement will be from pubs, but that'll be an interesting one to see.
Yeah.
You never know.
No, a pint of beer actually is a lot of it is excise duty one way or another, isn't it? Is that true of a glass of wine?
It is, yeah. A lot of it is. I think it's for a still bottle of wine, and that's sort of an average percentage. I think it's about £2.30 or whatever for excise duty. Yeah, so it's a
Yeah, so
lot.
quite high. Yeah,
Yeah,
perhaps
so
the
that's why
government.
a lot of your wines that you buy from Aldi, well, the cheaper end wines, basically half of that is excise duty, a quarter of it is probably packaging, the little bit more is logistics, and all the actual grape is the actual wine
Yeah.
value, very very small amount. So yeah.
Well, I think if I was Boris and I wanted to take the heat off my birthday cake, I would actually slash the duty on wine and beer and say, "Go to it for a couple of months, chaps."
That would be. I think that would be a good decision. I think it probably. Obviously, it'd lose a lot of income for the government, so that's maybe why they're tentative. But I think it would be a fantastic hoo-ha for the rest of the nation, though.
It could get him elected next time.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, Fergus, it is 8:56. Time for both of us almost to go. So tell everybody very slowly what your company is, because you are, as you say, relatively new to this business, but you run a very, very, very good shop. And I got to know you over a couple of years, and I know how fastidious and ethical you are as a young businessman. So I would urge people to deal with you, but let them know who they're dealing with. How do they get hold of you?
So the wine company that I run is called Camino del Vino, which is spelled CAMINODELVINO. And you can find us online at www.caminodelvino.co.uk. You can type in Camino del Vino into Google, or you can find us on Instagram. We're all over the place. And Camino del Vino stands for wine path in Spanish. And we try and look for uncommon and interesting wines from around the wine world and try and broaden your horizon to a new world of wines and evolve your palate, basically. So yeah, that's what we try and do.
Good man you are, as they would say over the water, where a lot of people are called Fergus. Thanks very much for being with us. We look forward to having you next week if we don't see you before. I hope that everything that's going on in Westminster and everything that's going on the Russian border won't affect either our personal lives or our businesses. So see you next week.
Cheers, Keith. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
All right, there we are, 8:58. Just a reminder that the temperature today is going to range between 2 and 5, a light breeze, very light. I can see outside. Yes, a slight rocking of of my favorite trees, but only a slight rocking. So it is a slight breeze. Not much chance of rain today, and light cloud covering. Whether that means that we'll see any bursts of sun or not, I'm not sure. But the cloud is not going to be thick, which means it's not going to keep the heat in. So generally speaking, a chilly day, but not unpleasant. So I think time for you to go out. Excuse me. That sneeze normally comes on at 1 minute past 9. It came early this morning. I thought there was a time change or something. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Keith Hayes, Mirador Television. And we will go out. We'll go out gently this morning. Well, we'll go out gently and then we'll do this thing at the end, okay? But this is the town that we live in, and aren't we lucky to have this?